Welcome to the Non-Breaking Space Show. From Saskatchewan, Canada, I'm the Internet's Chris Enns, and today's show we've got a Best Of collection. Christopher Schmidt is out this episode, but that doesn't mean you can't enjoy the time. Nicole Sullivan talked about how she read W3C specs for fun, Lou Rosenfeld trying not to start a war between IA versus UX, and how Jessica Hish became a success. Before we get started, some things you need to know. The UX Design newsletter is a weekly list of articles, tutorials, and inspiration handpicked by Christopher Schmidt. Sign up at uxdesignnewsletter.com and have the best links of the week sent to your email. Set it and forget it with the Non-Breaking Space Show newsletter. Whenever a new show is ready, be notified in your inbox by signing up at newsletter.nonbreakingspace.tv. You can find show notes and links for this episode at nonbreakingspace.tv, and be sure to follow Christopher on Twitter at Teleject, Teleject. As always, thank you for telling others about the Non-Breaking Space Show. Now, on with the show.
Can you just tell us a little bit about how you got into the web design industry and what brought you here and what got you started?
You know, it's a really funny question because I actually got invited in Australia to go and speak to a bunch of college students about my path and, how to get to where I am and what I did to get there or whatever. And the more I told the story of my path, the more I realized that the best way to get where I am is probably nothing like the path that I took to get there. I studied economics in college. I basically took whatever classes I wanted. And every semester the course catalog would come out and I looked at it like a buffet of choices and I took whatever classes I was excited about. And then finally realized I did have to graduate. And so my dad sat me down and he's like, you do realize you're there to eventually have a diploma. And so I added up all my classes and figured out what they were closest to. And the degree I was closest to was a degree in economics. So I finished that one off.
So what, if you don't mind me interrupting, like what type of subjects, I find that really interesting because I feel like that'd be awesome. College was just like that. That'd be great.
It can be.
Yeah. What type of courses did you gravitate towards?
Well, my high school was really, really terrible. Like, I graduated 7th in my class and I couldn't have told you even roughly when the 2 world wars were. Really, really bad. Terrible education. Instead of learning history, they had us make up our own civilizations. Really not helpful. So I looked at college as a way to kind of get educated. And so I took math and I took chemistry and I took a ton of logic and philosophy and some psychology and kind of all across the board from hard sciences to, I took a speech class actually and almost failed it, but yeah, pretty much whatever caught my eye. But a lot of sort of economics and logic and that kind of thing.
And so you graduated and then what happened?
Then what happened? Well, I graduated and I realized the jobs you can get with an undergrad degree in economics are actually really horrendous. I became a credit report writer for a very brief 3 months and quit just before they were, I think, very close to firing me because I was terrible at it.
What is a credit report writer?
You have to call up companies and basically convince them to give you information about themselves in order to make their credit report more complete. The thing is, it's really not in their best interest to give you that information. So I had this huge moral dilemma around doing my job well. So then I decided I wanted to be a carpenter actually instead. So I quit the credit report writing career track and called every ad in the newspaper and begged them to let me have a try and got laughed at a bunch. And then eventually one of them said, well, you can come and work for me a week. And if you don't suck, maybe we'll keep you. Okay. So I did that and actually became a carpenter for the next 3 years, building houses frame to finish.
Awesome.
Yeah. But that actually does play into the web stuff quite a bit because I feel like when you've built real stuff, your tolerance for bugs is a bit lower and your attention to detail is a little higher.
Right.
Yeah.
So you did that for 3 years and then did you decide you wanted to do something else? And
Well, I hurt my hands.
Mhm.
Yeah. It turns out, like, when you weigh 100 and at that point 115 or something like that, lifting 200 pounds on a regular basis is kind of hard on your body. So I got really bad. I basically couldn't feel my hands, and the doctors, you have to do something else. You're gonna be hurt when you're older if you don't. So at that point, I said, I'll move to France. I'd like to speak a foreign language. and I couldn't, because I was a carpenter, I couldn't get any kind of paperwork to be in France. There was just no case that applied to me. They wouldn't say it was impossible, but it wasn't possible either. Like, there was no case. You're like an unemployed carpenter and you get to move to another country with a visa.
So so basically, your doctor told you can't be a carpenter, but you're applying a visa to be a carpenter in France.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
At least to just get there.
Okay,
right.
But so it wasn't possible. So I went as an illegal immigrant instead. And ended up reading. I was really bored. When you're an illegal immigrant, you can't work, you can't go to school, you can't really do anything. It's a pretty terrible state to be in. So I ended up reading W3C specifications to kind of
all right. Okay, back up here.
So far, you're pretty much describing most front-end developers' career path. I mean, this is how we all got started, people. So
so you're a legal immigrant in France, and how did you get from that to reading W3 specifications?
Well, a lot of my friends were working for the W3C at the time, so it wasn't that much of a jump, but still the fact that I kind of thought that was an interesting way to pass time was sort of funny. But yeah, so I just started reading them. I read XML schema and I read CSS, and I was like, wow, the CSS one is kind of a lot simpler than that XML schema. But I didn't get at all the fact that I thought that specs meant that's how it worked. Someone had written down how it worked, and that was like, I don't know, 2002 or something like that. So the CSS spec absolutely did not work the way it said it was supposed to. So it was kind of funny.
Right.
Yeah. And then finally, I kind of ended up, I sort of accidentally enrolled in engineering school because my French was pretty terrible. I thought I was taking like a little night class in Java, and I was like, wow, this is really, really hard. And it turned out as my French improved, I realized I had actually enrolled in like a proper engineering school. So I ended up with, a random smattering of 6 or 7 or 10 engineering classes, something like that. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I think people should definitely follow that exact path.
This is not, I don't think anyone could follow that path.
It's ridiculous. When I was speaking to the students in Sydney, their eyes just kept getting wider. And I'm like, yeah, I just did whatever felt right at the time. And it kind of added up to career. But yeah.
Oh, man, that'd be awesome. So like parents would come like, so what'd you learn? Like, well, basically, if I just did anything I wanted to do, everything turns out great. I'm like, oh, man.
There you go. No, that's a good lesson. I think that's a good lesson.
Yeah.
So Argus Associates was pretty much the first information architecture firm. In fact, I think it was the only one, right, for a long time. Now your emphasis seems to be on user experience. That's what Rosenfeld Media, the books that you publish, are about. Maybe you could explain for people who are kind of don't understand the subtleties of the differences between these two. What's information architecture? What's user experience? Where do they overlap, and how are they different?
Oh God, you in a way, you're asking me to not participate in one but two religious wars at the same time around the DTDTs, which is defining the damn thing. But here I go. Thanks a lot, guys. I would suggest that information architecture is basically a series of practices around making information more findable. We do that by working on approaches to organizing it, structuring it, labeling it, and making search work well. And so it's basically, let's do a kind of design around findability, specifically navigation and search. and making those things work together. User experience, on the other hand, I would not say is a field or a discipline or a practice. In many respects, it's best described as a shared state of consciousness or state of mind that people from different design disciplines have when they are working on really big, challenging projects for which one set of design tools or perspectives is insufficient. So when you put together interaction designers and information architects and usability testing people and content strategists and visual designers and on and on and on, and you put them together, they need to have something in common so they can actually work together. And the commonality is what we call UX. It's to some degree the consciousness that or realization that they need to work together. It's partially the fact that they need to have common vocabulary so they can actually have a conversation that's constructive and productive. And it's partly the recognition that they just can't do it on their own. You don't want to, look, imagine if, pick your favorite application, website, or other service. Imagine it was just designed by usability people, or just designed by visual designers, or just designed by information architects, and how bad it would be. The really successful stuff is coherent and cohesive because it was designed by people who had goals of cohesiveness and coherence. And to me, those are user experience people, regardless of where they originally come from.
So you were saying IA, information architecture, is kind of a discipline, but UX is not necessarily a discipline? Is that what you're saying?
UX is not a discipline. It's people from different disciplines that are pulling those ideas, those tools, those practices together and making them work together. So you can't say that this is how UX is done, because how it's done in the context of developing an app for the mobile context may be very different than how it's done when you are developing or designing an intranet for a Fortune 50. Or when you're designing Disneyland. Those are all very different contexts in which user experience plays a big role, but the tools, the practices, the perspectives that you would use in each of those situations could be radically different. The consciousness, the understanding that this is an interdisciplinary work is the same, but which disciplines and which tools come to play in each of those projects could be quite different.
So let's say you're on a web team with a bunch of designers and information architects and other people, and somebody new joins your team and they don't know what UX is. And you say, you need to join our consciousness of UX. How would you explain it to them? How would you bring them up to speed? What would you do to say, this is how we need to think to be user experience oriented, web designers?
That's a tough one. And sometimes the easiest way is to not explain, but to show or to use kind of concrete analogies or demonstrations. So, for example, this is like a stupid example, but I would say, how you love Apple, the experience that Apple gives you. Well, let's do a little math. Apple minus user experience equals Sony. That's unfair and stupid, but it kind of makes a certain point that there's a certain consciousness that people at Apple have about how they approach design that's different than the sort of disjointed series of products and services that a company like Sony produces. What you want to do is to get that person to then ask, well, what is the difference? And then that sets them up to have a conversation about how there are different kinds of tools that come from different disciplines that come to play in each setting. And, you might say, let's think about what you bring. Now, let's think about what's not on that list. You might be an interaction designer. Do you know anything about metadata? Do you know anything about ethnography? Do you know anything about yada, yada? Well, here's what those things are and how they work with what you do. So, but in a way, that's not a fair question because it sort of depends on whom you're bringing onto your team. If you're bringing on someone who's, my age, late 40s, it's a very different conversation that you'd have with them than bringing on someone who's in their early 20s, who's grown up with good user experience and maybe more importantly, a kind of mind that is already either good at or ready to do synthesis in a way that old farts like me aren't. So let me explain what I mean. And people like me in my generation, when we got our academic training, when we were sort of inoculated with the germs of our disciplines, we were in kind of siloed grad schools and other programs where we weren't really necessarily encouraged to look outside our field. Right. And we were told to read certain journals and magazines and go to certain conferences and hang out with people like us. Right. And contrast that with the people I think who are coming into the field now, and by the field I mean the industry of design and development. They are natural synthesizers. I don't think they have those disciplinary blinders on in quite the same way. They are pretty comfortable going to conferences that other disciplines might put on because they look interesting. They're not blindly allied to the professional association that they joined at college. In fact, they often don't bother with professional associations. The sort of sense of identity they have is looser and more flexible and therefore more open to synthesis. So, like, I always like to, not that he's that young anymore, but I always feel like he's kind of young and a wonder kind. Luke Wroblewski is one of our authors, and he's someone who has like this visual design background, but can code and does some great research that draws on a lot of usability engineering principles and on and on. And I don't think he really cares. He just looks at like what is it going to take to solve problems?
Right.
So you did another project. What is this? In 2009, you started the Daily Drop Cap?
Indeed.
What is that project?
So that was probably my first big side project that I did. And what happened was I was leaving my day job with Louise Feely, she was like absolutely a massive inspiration and basically jump-started me into this whole world of like vintage typography stuff. I was interested in it before, but it wasn't until working for her for 2.5 years that I really dug my heels in. But my freelance work was getting really overwhelming. And I sort of knew that I wanted to be full-time freelance at some point. And I also had a bunch of other ideas for side projects and for a typeface that I wanted to work on. So I ended up giving notice there. But then when I left, I knew that there would be client projects that were coming along that I didn't feel like working on. Sometimes you just do super cheesy illustration just because it pays the bills. And at that point, it was definitely overwhelmingly happening. So I wanted something that I could do every day, that I could still work on my lettering skills and make sure that I was doing lettering even when I wasn't getting hired to do it. And also just make sure that I had a way to sort of challenge myself to, do something really different every day, to not have to work in the same styles, to really push myself to work in a lot of different styles. So I gave myself a goal. Well, I set up this site, Daily Drop Cap, and my whole plan was to illustrate a letter a day. And my goal was to do it for 12 alphabets. So it would take about a year, a little over a year. It ended up taking about 1.5 years because of travel and stuff in between. And every day of the week, I didn't do it on the weekends, but every weekday, I would wake up in the morning and the first thing that I did was draw a letter. And what ended up happening was something that I completely did not foresee, was that it completely shot me into like full force into the world of lettering. And I became like one of the only people that people could instantly call up when they thought about illustrative lettering work.
Wow.
It just went on every design blog. It really, I was getting a lot of consistent illustration work. Like my career was going really well, but it wasn't until I launched that I became like more of a public figure. I would I started getting asked to do speaking stuff at that point. People would write me to get my opinion about lettering for articles and things like that. So at that moment that was really the turning point of when my lettering career took off. So that project went on for about 1.5 years. And then I sell prints of the letters on my site. And it actually ended up spurring this really awesome project that just launched publicly, which I'm working with Penguin Books to do a classic series where we're doing 26 books. and it's the full alphabet, and it's going to be like a rainbow spectrum for the book. So they start at red and they end up, probably like back at red. And each of the books is chosen by the author's last name. So it's like Austen, Bronte, etc. And the entire design is around doing a giant letter on the front cover. So it's really cool. They're branding it as like penguin drop caps, and it's sort of all about the fact that I'm working on it, which is awesome.
Oh, cool.
So I guess the lesson is, if you are an artist toiling in obscurity, build a website and update it every day.
Well, it's more like show people what you're interested in doing. You know, I think a big problem that a lot of young folks have, or a lot of people that are struggling with their careers have, are they don't know how to put forth the work that they actually want to future do. You know, they might have work in their portfolio that they think is their best work, but that they hated doing. And they'll keep it in their portfolio because it's good work, but it's not actually what they want to be doing for a living.
Right. Yeah.
So it's really important that when you actually put work out there, it's the kind of work that you want to get in the future, because you know, clients are not as creative as we are, and they want to hire us based on the work that we've done in the past.
Right.
And, you know, I'm speaking to the majority of clients, not to like the amazing clients that sometimes have like vision and really know what they're doing. But, you know, the majority of clients that try and hire you, when they say, I'm looking for a logo that is a vintage logo that incorporates a tree, they're going to look through people's portfolios that have vintage logos that incorporate trees, you know?
Right.
They look for the work that they want to get. So you have to have the work in your portfolio that you want to future do.
Right. Well, it also goes into like in doing research, you had I think you had a quote. I'm going to totally paraphrase it and probably butcher the quote, and you can correct me. But it's like if you're doing work and you don't like it, you should think about the work that you do when you're procrastinating.
Actually, that's pretty close. So it was the work you do when you're procrastinating is the work you should be doing for the rest of your life. Right. And a big thing with that is that people have a hard time choosing careers because careers seem like a really huge decision. You know, like when you graduate from college, or when you're in college and you have to choose a major, like it's a huge decision. When you're assigning yourself a title as a professional, it's a huge decision. But if you look at the micro decisions rather than the macro, it makes it a lot easier to choose the path that you want to take. So if you're a student and you're listening to this, you know, look at the work that you actually enjoy doing in college. Like, don't look at it like, I love doing graphic design, I love doing web design, I love doing painting. Like it's too macro. But if you find yourself really focusing on like, I love drawing this specific kind of thing, or I love it when I can like spend 4 hours doing this thing that I like to do, even if it's not super sexy, that can really help influence the kind of work that you end up doing. Mm-hmm. Because I think a lot of people make decisions about their careers based on titles and not based on what they're actually doing day to day. And ultimately, what you want to end up with is a career that doesn't feel like a job. You know, you want to end up with something that you go to work and actually enjoy what you're doing for the 9 or 10 hours that you're at work. And if you can make those decisions based on the actual tasks that you're completing throughout the day and choose a career that has more of those tasks, then you're going to enjoy your life a lot more.
Hey, so like, how did Microsoft just call you up, or just like?
Oh, we did a couple of things for Nishant.
Yeah.
Sorry, and he did it all. We owe him like everything.
Oh, no.
So we did like Lost Worlds fairs and all those mix online. So he kind of.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We were at lunch at South by. I was like, "Do you want to do the Microsoft homepage?" That's pretty much the story right there. I said yes. They called me and he said, yes. Hey, it's Dan.
Hey, guys. Listen, I am sorry for the delay.
No problem.
It's kind of it's funny. I forgot I didn't install Skype yet on this machine. And it's like, okay, let's go. And where's Skype? And so I had to download and install it. Sorry about that.
No problem. Cool, man. Well, glad you're here. And
I am glad I'm here too. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Cool. And Trent is here, as you know. And then
Trent Walton, how are you doing, man?
Good. I don't want to make you feel bad, but I am sitting here in a tuxedo. And I've been up since 3:30 this morning because I was so nervous.
Me too, man. Me too.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Right? I mean, I don't have a tuxedo on, but I actually don't have anything on. But,
I'm still nervous.
And
I'm still very nervous. It's kind of what I do when I get nervous. I just take all my clothes off. Yeah. It helps immensely.
So I just, as a vision of you guys, just one with a tuxedo, one naked, just staring at the MacBook. For the last 9 hours.
Your vision is probably accurate. We'll put it that way. I'm telling you.
So glad we didn't do a video call.
I know. Me too, man.
Oh man,
it's been awkward.
So I mean, just a quick rundown of what we're going to do today is, so like, I'm not sure if you heard of our podcast episode before or not, but so Chris Enns is our producer. Hey, Chris.
Hello.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Dan. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Big fan.
Yeah, man. Thanks.
Yeah. So,
fan of your show.
Oh, man. Cool. Thanks. So, yeah, and we wouldn't have a show without Chris. He actually makes it all happen for us. So, I'm really happy.
I probably have a better show without Chris. Anyways, okay.
So he actually does, like, he produces the whole thing, puts it together, duct tapes it up, and sends it out there. And he also does our intros for that. So he's got an intro, and then Trent is our guest host. So we'll do a quick chat, see how things are going with him, and then we'll pull you in and then talk until we're done. It's pretty much
That's fantastic. It sounds awesome. I'm honored to be here. You guys have done some good stuff here.
Oh.
A lot of cool. I almost swore, and for no reason really.
It's just because you're so nervous.
I am very nervous. It's not clear.
We had Jessica Hish on a couple episodes ago, and she dropped a bunch of S-bombs that we had to edit out. So don't worry if something slips out,
okay.
we'll catch it.
All right.
Do you do beeps? Because that's probably sound really funny. I like the beeps.
I know. Yeah, beeps would be funny.
I think for this one we should get like a basketball bounce or something like a.
You should just beep or basketball
whistle.
bounce random words just to make it sound really like terrible people. Yeah.
We could choose one word to always replace it.
I was recording already.
Pushing pixels, bleep out pushing, and who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just put in tuxedo.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I got Trent saying, or you saying tuxedo, whoever said tuxedo.
I think we all said tuxedo.
We're all at fault for that one.
Safety word.
Safe word.
Wait, Trent, which podcast are you here for?
I don't know.
Sure. Okay.
Now you may wonder why they don't let me on Shop Talk very much. I think.
All right. So
sorry, Christopher, you're trying to be professional.
No. I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to take off my clothes and just relax.
All right, join in the fun.
Yeah.
But apparently it doesn't work yet. I get really nervous. But
this is already the best podcast I've ever been on. By the way.